Okay, so now I'm showing you how the loader is when you're actually using it. Now, it's all bumpy and it's like frozen mud, so it's really bumpy. And it was hard to get everything I needed. I actually had the camera propped on my head. So keep in mind what my eyes see, the camera couldn't. So right now I'm doing a downward tilt. You tilt your forks down to the ground where they almost dig under the logs. Here's an example. Now here's what happens if they're flat. You see that space? You end up missing the bottom row of logs, and you don't want that. So now I do a downward tilt, and I open up the grapple really wide, and I just go for it. Now, when they roll up like that, that's usually a good grapple. So you squeeze it or close it, but you slightly want to back out because on the other side of it, the logs will roll, and then you have a big mess, and you don't want that. So I like to do it kind of slow while I'm closing it, and I keep closing it even as I'm backing out, just in case I may have a wide gap because more logs will drop. So I keep doing that because it's bumpy, and a lot of times if there is a big gap and you hit a bump, you'll have maybe like 20 logs falling out, and you don't want to have to pick them up, especially as it gets colder. And if they're full of ice and snow and the logs are slick, they'll fall out easy. So it's, as you can see, it's a bumpy ride. Keep in mind I have the camera on my helmet. So when I get up close to this table, it has chains. The two chains on the right are where I try to put them on. And I make sure the bottom of the grapple, the bottom and the back of the grapple, are on each side of the chain. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tilt downwards and then open up the spoon or grapple, whatever you want to call it, and tilt it down and back out. And it's a lot better if you open it wide, and because if you don't and you tilt and back out, you will scoop some logs. So you gotta always keep that in mind. I'm also switching gears. Every time I load the table, I shift in the first gear. And when I'm driving, sometimes it's in third gear, sometimes it's in second. You gotta always shift gears because you don't want to ruin the motor. So as I go driving now, I'm gonna pick up another one. And it looks like I don't have that big of a mess. Sometimes the logs just fall sideways. But since it's okay, just do the same routine. Downward tilt, open the grapple really wide. And when I pick up logs, I usually have them in second. And then I just go for it from there. And you want the logs to be in the center of your grapple. It's just much easier. Now this one, as you can see, I have more of the logs towards the far right of the grapple. You don't want that, but I can still get away with it. Usually if you know you ain't got a good grapple, most guys will drop them down and then go again. And sometimes if you have a bad grapple, it's usually because there's broken logs in there. And if any logs are at the end of your grapple, they will break. I mean, it's hydraulic, has a lot of pressure, very sensitive. But in this case, everything looks good, which I would say is lucky. I've had some bad grapples in the past. So I'll tilt it down. So I always watch at the bottom, like always. And now, Since there's already logs there, I'm tilting it. You want to use it like a backboard. So I picture it as like a hand, like you slowly want to tilt that, just in case there's any logs. If there is an opening, a gap, you kind of want them to fall there first. And now the operator kind of helped me out. He turned on the chain, so you see how they just rolled out. So that shows he's a good operator. He is working with you. Sometimes, if I see somebody loading the table, I'll slowly move the chain out, just so the logs get rolled out nice. It makes the loader operator look like a professional, and nobody likes picking up the logs, so that's something to keep in mind. So same thing, same routine, tilt downwards, punch it. Now, this time they're more centered, and that's a good grapple. So I'm looking around because I'm looking at the bottom. So if you ever see the camera move in odd areas, I'm usually turning my head. So I'm reversing now, and I'm just making sure that I'm good. So there is pieces of broken logs on the ground, and I'm trying to avoid those as I'm driving. Okay. So I'm looking around, I'm looking like at the bottom, like where I always look. So that's why the camera is going side to side. Now you see some of the logs, some of them are actually broken, like they're too short to be a decent log. So naturally they would fall out. What you don't want is the whole full log falling out. That sucks. I don't mind picking up a few, but in the past I've had picked up maybe like 20 to 30. It sucks. So what I'm doing now is slowly shifting this log over towards the right just to make sure it stays on that chain. Because once he moves the chain, they would twist sideways or they would fall out. And if you're good as you're dropping it, half of the grapple you can shift by just turning your forks a little. And that's what I was doing. I was slightly turning it towards the right as I was dropping it. So same routine now. Oh, I think right now I'm trying to adjust the log because some went towards the side and I wanted it lined up with the grapple. So I'll try to adjust it without getting out, but if it doesn't work, I actually get out and do it by hand. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to get the forks flat on the ground and just slide it over. But there is pieces of wood on the other side and they're getting in my way. And everything looks good. Now from there, I can tell that it was kind of a bad grab. You see the logs fall. And that's why the grapple isn't so big like the normal ones. But at this point, I'm just glad I have a decent amount of logs. So as I'm transporting it over towards the table, still watching out for bumps. So notice that there is still logs there. You want to use those as a backboard. And you see at the bottom how some of them kind of look like they were going to fall. If it was colder and they were icy, they probably would have fell out. And to keep in mind, this video was almost an hour. I chopped it down and I sped some of the footage up just to make it as long as it is now. I think it's now a little bit past a half an hour. And not all of these are in I should say one session, I guess. I would take them when we needed them. and then I would park the loader. So what you're seeing is a lot of splice footage. So same thing is I'm on the side of it just trying to slide the front logs up because kind of depends on your whole grapple. And you want a good, downward tilt. You're kind of digging into the ground as you're going in. But if you miss that first log, even first bottom row, it will mess everything up. And it happens a lot, especially after it snows and it melts. So see, it didn't work, so I got out. So you see, just those 3 logs, I had to straighten those. Now you could kind of see a trail I left from the grapples from the previous grab. And I'm making sure that the forks are down just like I want them and not flat. And they are, so I just go for it from there. And open up and then go. And like always, every time you close, I'm back tilting. That's what I forgot to mention earlier. So I'm closing, I'm back tilting, and I'm slowly reversing. Doing all of this. In the video, it looks like I'm going fast, but in real time, I'm not. I'm doing it because some will fall out of the grapple and some will roll off from the remaining logs, and it's just an hassle. It seems easy now, but it takes a lot of practice, a lot of hours. And the same as when I dump them on a table. Just want to be humble about the situation because it it took a lot of work to do that, a lot of practice. And even though I have the experience now, I'll still say I'm lucky because there are some days it just depends on the way the rows of logs are. It's why they want you to adjust them all evenly and flushed, especially if there's broken logs or small logs in there. They kind of want them in between all the big logs because when they dump them off or when they grab them, they just fall through and it's just a big mess. So there's a lot of things you got to learn throughout this job. Okay, now you can see how the routine is. I'll slowly back out and keep it tilted down. And while I'm doing that, I'm shifting my gears. So if you see me moving, obviously I didn't shift my gears, but right here you can see me. I'm using my fork because I'm trying to slide it over because they like to fall off the edge. But every time you see me stop and pause, I'm shifting gears. And I like to drive with the grapple closed because when you're hitting the bumps, it does rattle hard. Same with all these machines here, they will rattle and it shakes from the forklift to the skid steer to the 244, pretty much everything. Okay, this, I don't remember what I was doing at the time. I think I might be adjusting another log. Because if I want to use only my forks, I open that grapple as wide as I can so it doesn't get in the way. I think that's what I'm doing. Because like I said before, what my eyes and the camera see, it doesn't get everything. Now I look at some of the logs, they look like they're twisted. A lot of that too is because the way they fall. And I try not to lift them way up in the air like that because they fall, they roll, they bounce, and they would turn sideways. So you see that log hanging out there? If I see one like that, I try to move it over more towards the right. I'll lay it down. So right at the edge of the grapple, I'll lay that down first and slowly, and I do mean slowly, let open my grapple. See, there it goes. And if you do it right, it'll fix itself. But you see how close to the edge it is? It's about ready to miss that chain. What that do will fall sideways. But when you move around and it fixed itself. Because what I was doing is I shoved the whole pile forward. And sometimes that's what we do, especially if the dollar operator isn't there to move the chain forward. Then we'll push it forward. And when you do that, it kind of fixes itself. So I was able to adjust maybe like 3 or 4 of those logs that were about to fall off. Sometimes the logs are sticking out too far on one side. So what we'll do when we drop them on the table is we'll go on the side and use our forks to knock them in. And now hopefully our dollar operator is aware that we're doing that and he doesn't move it forward, because if he does, then we can't get to it. And maybe at some point it might fall off because of its imbalance. Okay, so it looks like a nice grapple. I was kind of glad that that happened at the time. Just like this one, if you look on the left, you'll see one that's kind of sideways. Because in these scenarios, it's good to show what could happen. And you're kind of forced to get creative. Can you get through it or not? And so far, I've gotten through it. If not, then there's a lot of logs you gotta pick up. And every time I dropped a grapple, no matter how good I thought I was, I still knew I had a lot to learn. So now I'm using that other grapple, the previous one, as a backboard. So you see the bottom of the forks? Yeah, there's some logs that are about ready to slide out. There's a little gap there. So once I see that, I tilt it, and if they fall out, good. Because I'd rather have them fall right there than anywhere else. And then I'll slowly open it. There. See, it falls down when you open it. So you notice it's more than one thing you got to do. You tilt down, you back out, and you also lift up.
And that's how we do it.